Okay, dear friends, welcome to the elevation seminar. This is such a tremendous moment to have you all here. It's an exceptional group of people, and I believe we are going to create together exceptional 3 days. This is, from my point of view, this is really a dream come true, because I've been running seminars for companies like this, but this is the first time that we organize one so that people from different walks of life can come in, and it really is quite a group of people, as I think we'll see a bit later. But let me rush into a couple of things that I like to indicate in terms of our approach here. I mean, if you think about a seminar, you could say that in a seminar, what you want to have is that well, there's got to be something at the focus, and what's going to be at the focus is somewhat unusual in the sense that it's not going to be knowledge of some kind that participants wouldn't have before coming to the seminar that would be at the focus. Unlike, I would say, in many seminars, it's rather your own reflections for which we try to create space. So you could say it's also your associations, that is something that emerges as a result of what I suggest or somebody during a break suggests. That's going to be at the focus, with the result that this will be tremendously activating in terms of your personal insights. And of course, if we aim at a platform of tremendous personal insights, you could say that they're bound to be different from one person to another. So this is different as compared to what you normally have in a seminar setting or a lecture kind of setting, where the idea is pretty much that something that is the same is copied on the hard disks of the participants, because there's something that is supposed to be delivered effectively is supposed to be something so valuable that people really should have that. And why not? But this is not our focus. Our focus is the participants' own reflections, meaning that we are turning to our subjective experience and to our subjective processes. Notice that when we talk about our subjective processes that generate insights, for instance, it's pretty clear that somebody might, for instance, take notes. But another person might not take that many notes, because it could be that their subjective processes in that respect are different. So it could be that somebody's subjective processes are enhanced by taking notes. But somebody's, some other person might feel that taking notes really is somehow intervenes with my subjective processes. So there's no really need for somebody to take notes, but at the same time it could be that somebody does take notes. But it really isn't any kind of objective models that we would here focus on, although I do offer some suggestions that I personally think are valuable, but still that's not really the focus. It's subjective experience and subjective processes that is the focus. At the same time, what we are focusing on is life as abundance, or as some inherently rich, as opposed to something that is lacking in some respects. Notice that if we would focus on, let's say, skills, it will be obvious that if you focus on skills, there's something that is lacking, and perhaps in the course of that training session, you can increase your strength into something that you lack. But our focus in this seminar is not what we lack, it's on what we already have. And we would like to have something that we already have to serve us better. I mean, if you think about, for instance, experience, it's obvious that each of us, and irrespective of our age, irrespective of our situation, each of us have already a lot of experience. Now, some of that experience is in use. But it could be that, first of all, that some parts of our experience that are in use are not in use in the right contexts. Also, it could be that some aspects of our experience which lie there all the time are not really that much in use. But we still have that wealth of experience, and it's to that wealth, that abundance, that richness towards we want to turn, with the hope that with reflection it can generate valuable insights. Meaning that we are really focusing on our own thinking, as opposed to the thinking or thoughts of some authority. Either the speaker, in this case me as an authority, or some authority that the speaker refers to as authority. I mean, we do have some such figures coming up, but still that's not at the focus. At the focus is your own thinking. So we are only using those authorities as kind of a springboard for increased insight, for increased understanding of some possibilities that might inspire us. And fifthly, what we are here putting at the focus is the movement forward from within. Meaning in your case, you move somewhere forward. But what you use in that process is your own strengths, your own experiences, your own subjective, whatever mechanisms there might be, some of which could be more easily accessible than others. I mean, one minimal point about us as human beings is that obviously we are pretty complex, meaning that whatever conceptual understanding we have from the meta level about ourselves is going to be rough. I mean, it really isn't going to be that nuanced to whatever meta-level understanding we have of ourselves. So it could be that it's pretty obvious that some aspects of us don't really fit into the picture that we have formed of ourselves, but still we have that resource. So at the focus is movement forward from within. Now, putting this still slightly differently, and looking now to Saturday. The intended outcomes are as follows. First of all, we look for some energy. Now, as you entered this room, you immediately could sense the energy of the people in the room already. And it's quite clear that we really have people that are driven forward, people who have some ideas regarding where they want their lives to be and where they perhaps would like to have a contribution. And they might want to crystallize that a little bit further, but you sense the movement forward in the people already in the room. Now, we want to build from that energy. It probably is also, and this is something I like very much in my seminars, it probably is pretty sort of good-willed energy. That is, energy that sort of assumes that life is good and people on the whole are good. And of course you have all kinds of dark forces, but they are really not an element that you would expect to have a say in this room. So you can approach people with considerable openness, because you can pretty much trust the fact that if somebody is ready to devote almost 3 days for Esa's seminar, it's pretty clear that this person isn't, after finding something to criticize, let's say, into somebody who is also participating in the same seminar. I mean, why would the person want to do it? So it's this kind of good-willed expectation that is also going to be part of the energy. Now, when you raise your energies, for instance, you go to a tremendous concert. It could be that if you go to that tremendous concert by, let's say, Bruce Springsteen, for quite a few days, your energies are uplifted. So the energy that Bruce and the E Street Band created on that stadium carries you to the future. But sooner or later, the energy is going to start to come down. Now, you could say, well, this is part of almost the physiology of what it means to be a human being, that there is a physiological element almost, the energy, meaning that even when you drive it up, it's going to come down sooner or later. But I would say that the long tail of our energy is going to be surprisingly long. I mean, if you think about in terms of the fact that, let's say, in a normal bookstore, you only have so many different titles because it's physically restricted as to how many titles can you have in a physical bookstore. But of course, Amazon is not restricted in that sense, meaning that in terms of the sales of Amazon as a bookstore, there's this long tail because they also sell books that only, let's say, sell the particular title 3 copies a year. But if you have, let's say, 1 million such books, it's considerable number of books. It's a long tail in that particular arena. But we are going to have my vision is surprisingly long tail in terms of the energy that we create. Also, our intended outcome, in addition to the energy, is increased activation of something, and I will come back to this later, something I will call the reflective mind. Now, the reflective mind is something with which you already operate just now, meaning that you sort of put things in perspective. You sort of look at things and other things at the same time. So it's different from, for instance, processing some information through some formula, and it's different from just reacting. It's taking perspectives. It's evaluating things. It's considering something vis-a-vis something else. So increased activation of your reflective mind with extremely long tail is something that I expect to emerge out of our 3 days. And thirdly, something I would call increased capabilities for net effects. Now, if you think about meeting somebody, let's say during the next break, as we are going to split this seminar to roughly 1 hour sessions, ending with a quick spontaneous discussion in a small group there, not a teamwork, but just discussion about the ideas that came to people's mind in the course of the previous set, and then we break for coffee. So you would have 1 hour sets and then maybe 15 minutes break. So on your way to the toilet, you talk to somebody who was sitting quite far from you in this space, but you talk with the person. But it could be that the person suggests something that seeds a point that you don't really move forward with because, I mean, it's a sort of surprising point. I mean, it could be, for instance, that you are in design, as some people in this room are, you are in design, but it could be that the person with whom you are talking is let's say, a researcher. So most of the time, this researcher operates, let's say, with words, with concepts, as opposed to, let's say, images. But the person makes a point, or could it be that the person is a musician? So as some of the people in this room are. So something comes up, and it's a seed. But the point is that in the energy that we create, the net with which you are ready to catch a point that somebody makes is increased. And it's just that you are sort of observing that that's a possible perspective. Didn't think from that angle, but nice to hear. Thanks for sharing that. And it's something that comes into you as part of your experience from this moment on. But our point is what happens after this, which means that you are going to go forward with one experience richer. So it's that kind of net effect that we want to create with increased activation. And the expectation is that it's going to have quite a long tail also. I would say hopefully extremely long tail, because it's something that can continue. So you sort of can continue to catch serves or passes that come from unexpected dimensions. So those three outcomes in mind, and with that kind of focus in mind, let me now turn to observing that this really is a unique group of people. Now, the fact that it's a unique group of people makes the following point, I would say, particularly apt here. Now, when you take a look at people in this room, it's pretty obvious that, you know, you can sort of believe that you can guess something of somebody. So I bet this person is in design, for instance, on the basis of the, let's say, the way the person dresses, or whatever reason it could be for you to believe it. This person is in design, so probably the person is good in visual thinking, let's say. So there are aspects you can also know if you come here together with your colleague. So probably you know a lot about the person already, but of course there is always something in people that haven't come out so far. I mean, if you think about yourself, it's obvious that even when it comes to yourself, it's only some aspect of yourself that have so far manifested themselves. So you could say there's more good than meets the eye in anybody. But that means from the point of view of the subject that also goes for oneself. So that's one of the key starting points of this seminar from my point of view. To look into those strengths, whatever name we give for it, capabilities, whatever positivities there are in us that for some reason are not in full use at the current time, but it's obvious that other people have such aspects as well. So therefore one hopes to approach the other one in such a way that those aspects of the other one show up that even he or she might not be that well aware of as of now. So this is a key starting point of our considerations. And then there's another one, and now this is a little bit more personal. I'm a philosopher myself, and in the 80s, I lectured a few times. I wasn't in Otaniemi at that time. I was at University of Helsinki. But I lectured a few times on history of philosophy. And then I also wrote a book on history of philosophy. So I studied history of philosophy. Now, when you look at history of philosophy in the West, what turns out is that there's really tremendous emphasis upon knowledge. So basically what a lot of philosophy amounts to is articulation regarding what really is knowledge. I mean, what can you mean by knowledge? What really is knowledge? In what ways is knowledge different from, let's say, belief? So you have this tremendous emphasis upon knowledge, and you say, yeah, it's part and parcel of our entire culture, which is based on knowledge, basically. So you have all these tremendous mechanisms which are built upon knowledge. Okay, so knowledge is really power and something on which huge institutions are built. But to me, it was interesting in the 80s as to, you know, why all this emphasis on knowledge? Why not, for instance, tenderness? I mean, tenderness is also a great theme. You know, tenderness is a totally different theme from knowledge. For one thing, if you talk about tenderness, then there is connectivity to start with. When you talk about knowledge, You can sort of at least believe that you can know something of the something which is objective. But because it's objective, you're not really connected the way you are in tenderness, because in tenderness there's the subjective dimension, which really is fundamental. It's also touch related. But touch is difficult to put into words or any sort of ways to represent things that perhaps when you just look at knowledge would be particularly tempting to use. So to me, this observation of kind of a question, why always knowledge, why not, for instance, tenderness, leads to the following point. If you think about sports, what happens in sports is that people allow themselves forms of behavior which are not that usual outside of sports. Let's say, for instance, in office contexts, the kind of physical encounter which is quite appropriate in sports is not considered to be appropriate. I mean, if you think about, for instance, let's say the beginning of a basketball game. What happens in the beginning of a basketball game is that the players come to the court, but as they come to the court, they greet one another in a particular way. You can say, hey, what's the point in greeting these players? Didn't you know that it's those players that you are going to meet in the court? Because, I mean, you were just in the locker room with exactly the same guys. I mean, what's the point of this sort of physical, sort of excited, give me 5 kind of hugs and whatever they are, this sort of energy-giving ways of meeting your teammates, and then you say, well, that's precisely the idea, because the game is just about to begin, so you want to create the energy. I mean, if it's such a small thing as just sort of greeting the other one just now with encouragement, with enthusiasm, sort of physically also allowing yourself that kind of touch to the other person that your physiology allows for, where you don't maintain the distance, but you give your hand, you give a part of your body, to that encounter. That's allowed for in sports, and for a good reason, because you need the energy. So you could say, well, couldn't we introduce something like that to, let's say, to the beginning of a seminar? I mean, let's say you have a tremendous seminar coming up with tremendous people, so wouldn't one want to have kind of a tender and dynamic moment of meeting? I mean, of course, it's great to do an introduction round, and I suggest that we might want to do one later on, but, the introduction round is a little bit like the knowledge culture. So you know that this person who looks like that as an object has this kind of objective name. But couldn't you do a tender and dynamic kind of, let's say, 3 minutes thing in the beginning of a seminar where people would stand up and then start to generate, let's say, give me fives, power hugs, cheek kisses, excited sort of observations. Hey, where do you come from? Kind of little things that people can do if they just sort of throw themselves into that kind of moment of meeting. So let me suggest that we take here 3 minutes and create here a tremendous moment of tender and dynamic encounters. So please stand up and start to generate power hugs, give me fives, and say something about yourself, moving around there till you find. All right, thank you very much. That's beautiful. That was beautiful. Thank you very much. One way to approach our seminar is the following. If you think about the everyday in which you live, you could say the everyday in which you live brings out some aspects of you as a human being, because I would say you just can't cope with the demands of your everyday without doing so. So in many contexts, for instance, you have to reveal what your name is intellectually. And you can say, well, it's useful to have a name, and because then people can refer to you, and you know, its objects should be identifiable, and of course, to some extent, we are objects to the outside world. So also you could say that in many contexts you need to activate your capabilities for analytic reflection. So your verbalism. So these are your capabilities as a human being. Now, it's however also clear that as a human being you have a capability to create for another human being some uplift, some sort of local micro-level elevation out of almost nothing in 2 seconds. And we just saw that happening. It really is amazing. I mean, somebody just sort of approaches you. It's hard to tell exactly how it happens or what it consists of. But the fact is you feel the local little uplift because of the way that the person approaches. There's this encouragement, this sort of openness, certain curiosity, humor, whatever the elements are. We have the capability of making somebody feel accepted in 2 seconds. We have that capability. It's not really a skill. It's a capability we have because of the fact that we are human beings. But it could be that from your point of view, it's not really that relevant from the point of view of your everyday. Because in this everyday you face these tasks, and obviously the tasks are quite demanding, so you should optimize the use of your resources. And it could be that the resource that you have as a human being, which is to make somebody feel accepted in 2 seconds, doesn't seem like a relevant resource when it comes to your particular tasks. You could say, well, there are jobs regarding which it is relevant, but not to my particular kind of whatever it is. You could say that's a possible view. Or even more obviously, if you think about smiling, you say, well, human beings have capability to smile. Now, smiling is interesting because it basically amounts to a transformation. And I mean, if a person, in most cases, if a person is smiling, the person comes across surprisingly differently as compared to if the person is not smiling. And I'm not saying that we should smile, I'm just sort of acknowledging that it's sort of a local, micro-level transformation we are there talking about. But it's also a transformation that has potential impact upon the other one. Because a human being reacts to smile in a particular way. You could say also in a way that it's very hard to control. I mean, you can't help the fact that if the smile is genuine, it somehow affects you. But again, you could have the view that, like with making somebody feel accepted in 2 seconds, that this really isn't that relevant, let's say, in internet business. And whatever the business you are in is. So you could say, well, yes, we do have such capabilities, but in my specific case, they are not relevant. You say, okay, that's an optimizing act. Is it clear that your optimizing act goes optimally? Or could it be that there are resources that you just somehow end up pushing to the margin, which could be relevant, indeed surprisingly relevant, a new kind of situation in which your life now more and more perhaps takes place. So that's my my question. And with that question in mind, think about the following. And now I apparently jump to a different theme, but please follow. My special lady and me, we have twin boys, and at least are either one of them still here? Don't seem outside. Okay, they're outside, still looking for if some people that might come late, and we do know that some people have to come late. So anyway, so the boys are now 24, which is great in a number of ways. I mean, it's been great all the time, but the fact is, I mean, if one is absolutely sort of brutally honest, looking back, when the boys were born into a relationship that from my point of view was the love affair of the century, you know, my relationship with the special lady changed. I mean, this is just a fact because she became a mother, so that meant that I, who used to be the number 1 guy, ended up being the number 3 guy. And for a man of considerable ego, you know, this was something like a challenge. So I mean, but still looking back, having the boys is my biggest thing in life. It's the most valuable by far. So no question about that. But the fact is, at the same time, that my relationship with the special lady changed. I mean, if we speak in Formula 1 terms, I wasn't even the number 2 driver of the team, but some kind of test driver, you know, whose name you barely remember. I mean, if one is absolutely honest, so because the special lady was focusing up on the boys. Now, when the boys started high school, and it was the new year, I remember the first year of high school, the boys went for the first time to their own New Year's party. But the special lady and me, we were so nervous about the party that we couldn't go to any party. We just stayed at home waiting the boys to call and for us to be able to collect them from the party, because, you know, Finnish New Year, it's sort of aggressive, and you can't trust the buses, you can't trust you get the taxi and so forth. So we just waited at home for the boys to call us so we would collect them from the party, and then they called us and we went and collected them from the party, and it's been a great party. The boys were really going strong, and I was so excited because I was feeling, you know, there's finally now, you know, light at the end of the tunnel. And the moment approaches when I can announce, I'm back. And I was so excited, and of course, New Year there gave momentum to these thoughts, and so the boys were getting ready to go to bed, and I was there, you know, all uplifted, all elevated, and really looking forward to the future. I was so excited, I said to the boys, what would you say are my key weaknesses? To which it didn't take very long for the boys to come up with answers. Oliver said, well, a little bit hot-tempered. And he didn't say it in an accusatory way. It was just sort of an observation that this is also a perspective that you might want to reflect from. And Jerome continued by saying that a little bit moody. And I thought in my mind, well, this is pretty good. Then I said, is there something else? To which Oliver, who was the first one to speak, replied by getting out from the little dressing room in which he was. So he got out from there in order to emphasize his words and said, well, if you can make some headway in these 2 respects, that already would be a major breakthrough. Now, if you think about the fact, and again, I think this really is a fact, that as human beings we have capabilities, such as, for instance, making somebody feel accepted in 2 seconds, capability of smiling. We have these capabilities, but we also have, you could say, the even more remarkable capability, more generic capability of adopting a perspective that might not be suggested by the current task list in any way, but still a human being can adopt the perspective. I mean, it can be that the perspective is so far away from the everyday that you face right now that many people wouldn't even have thought about it. But the fact that many people wouldn't have thought about it doesn't mean that you couldn't think about it. I mean, a human being basically can adopt any perspective at any time. This is a key feature of a human being. It's amazing. That, for instance, if you think about the perspective of a breakthrough, say, this is possible for a human being to adopt. Let's say in a situation where your children are, let's say, 22 and 19, you say this probably is a new situation in the relationship. You know, maybe there is room for a breakthrough. Or you could say, okay, we've had great years without children. Now we have 2 children. You know, maybe there is a moment for a breakthrough. You know, it's all kinds of situations are potentially approachable from this perspective of a breakthrough. You know, somebody is, let's say, 28 years of age. You could say, well, this person who is 28 years of age probably has already gotten some touch regarding his or her strengths. So you could say, maybe the person, when it comes to certain achievements, has already on the horizon some such things regarding which the person wants to come up with breakthrough with. But you could say, why restrict to those? I mean, wouldn't it be that you could apply the perspective a bit more generally and perhaps bring it to shed light on you as a human being too, as opposed to just those achievements? I mean, that's not to dismiss the significance of, let's say, the perspective of a breakthrough when it comes to those particular achievements, but why restrict it there? And the amazing thing now is that when it comes to our thinking, as it in fact is realized most of the time, what happens is that it takes place via only a few perspectives. This is amazing. I mean, remember the point that I said is one of the key ideas at the focus, which is life as abundance. You can say, well, what might that, for instance, mean in the current context we are now covering? You say, well, it might mean that, you know, there's any number of perspectives. That's abundance. And what makes it amazing is that life experience indicates clearly that sometimes a perspective can bring about a breakthrough astonishingly easily. When you really think about it in terms of the impact that could be huge. It's just that somebody adopted that perspective, let's say a touch screen. It's just a perspective. But a lot of people refuse to take the perspective for some reason. You say, in retrospect, it typically is amazing. Why didn't people even think about it? But that's the way a human being easily is, that you get stuck with particular perspectives. Often perspectives that are reinforced for whatever reason by a given everyday. So for instance, cost consciousness is a perspective very hard to avoid in any kind of endeavor nowadays. Cost consciousness. So you need to think about costs. Now, costs, well, that's a theme. Yeah, but there are other themes. There's, for instance, the theme of, let's say, happiness. It's also a theme. You know, why is everybody thinking about costs? Why aren't people thinking about equally much about happiness? I mean, this is not to sort of dismiss the significance of, let's say, cost. It's just to acknowledge there are other perspectives, but very easily it happens in a given everyday that some particular perspective becomes reinforced tremendously. It's very hard to avoid, with the result that it sort of takes over. It's kind of like starts to mesmerize people, with the result that some other perspectives are pushed aside entirely. Now, one of the strengths, I would say, of our seminar is due to the fact that people come from different backgrounds. People's situations are different. This means that whatever perspectives the other person has, you could say they're likely to be somewhat different from what might be your sort of immediate perspectives. Means that without really doing anything that much, you can immediately enrich yourself by just listening what is the other's perspective. But that, of course, requires you to sort of open up to the person from the point of view of becoming potentially enriched by the other one's perspective, which might be pretty far from what your everyday tasks at the current time happen to be. I mean, let me say it differently. If there is a case on your table that really occupies your mind, and you meet in a seminar somebody who has the exact same issue on the table, but has worked on it already for quite some time, you say, you know, this is great. Because now you get the perspective that is so immediately relevant from the point of view of this particular task. So for instance, it could be, let's say you are in a managerial position and there are people in your team. Now a typical situation for anybody in a managerial position is that there's somebody in the team that you would really want to get rid of. But how do you get rid of this person without sort of causing too much harm, because the person is in many ways a good person, he's been doing good work, but it's just that the challenges now are such that he or she isn't really delivering. I mean, how do you do it? But then it turns out that you're in a seminar where somebody has faced the situation several times. And you like the person, his approach is sort of trust generating. So this is so great, because now you can perhaps solve this problem by just tuning into the other person from this particular dimension, because it's like on authority. It's great to get from the authority a template which has been tested. You know, this is really great when you have such a situation, but many situations that we face are not like that. So why rule out those other situations? And the reason why I believe that we'll be able to accomplish so much in the course of these 3 days is because of the fact that we have such tremendous experience in this room, at the same time as we have unique human beings in this room. So should it be the case that people also would be open to this kind of, you know, alternative perspective taking engagement? You might say that might surprisingly much illuminate your everyday in retrospect. I mean, as you consider what might be perspectives that are illuminating to my everyday, you of course make the evaluation on the basis of your own perspectives as they are at the current time. But of course, there's no particular reason to believe that your current perspectives cover the entire horizon. So therefore, just being open might sort of, through the side door, sneak in surprising perspectives. But much of the time, our everyday is constructed in such a way that as human beings, we close that side door. And we sort of demand that, yes, I'm ready for openings, I'm ready to sort of hear great perspectives, but they have to come through this particular door, and they have to be following such and such a format. Is, I would say, the typical approach, which is regrettable in view of the following fact, and this is fact again. Remember that as we live our everyday, some aspects of everyday don't really go the way we want them to go. Meaning that we can't help the fact that we experienced something in some way. But if it didn't go the way we wanted it to go, this creates negative energy. This creates negative effect. You know, often it could be that you were a little bit vulnerable that particular Tuesday morning. So although it was just an email, this little bit nasty email that somebody rushed out, overcome by his or her emotions, you know, you can't help the fact that it somehow made you feel that, you know, this partnership or this teamwork, this company isn't really what it used to be. meaning that there's this downscale register point that particular email comes to represent as far as you're concerned. And you, as it were, bring this little minus to your everyday. So also to situations that don't really have anything to do at all with this little minus. But you bring it in because it's part of you now. This overall perspective that this particular relationship isn't what it used to be. Or that our company isn't really that caring for its person like in the old days. Or that it's this cost consciousness, it really is pushing in everywhere. So the little minus forms, from your point of view, mentally a point of reference, but it's a downscale register point of reference. And of course you can still cope with many of these challenges because you're such a determined person. So the resolve is great. So I mean you are pushing forward. It's still that there is this little wound that was created by this small event. And you say, well, what's the cost? Well, the cost is, and this is now important, the cost is that something I would call the upscale register. The upscale register is a little bit dimmer. So it's a little bit harder for you to think in terms of, let's say, happiness, joy, excitement, respect, dignity, kind of higher up categories. Which are interesting categories because a human being can think from those categories. I mean, irrespective of the situation, a person can think in terms of dignity. And I remember, for instance, something my father told me, who was 3 years in the war. And he told me the story that one of the Russians was captured, and he was so afraid. And which is understandable, you're captured by the enemy force, and the general view among Russians was that the Finns are sort of totally barbaric. But this was the general perception they had. So there's my father. Father said that the guy was amazed when I gave him a cigarette. I mean, we were given the cigarettes, but I didn't smoke. I mean, I gave a guy a cigarette, the poor guy. So he said, this is possible for a human being. Sort of create dignity in a situation that doesn't offer that as the first choice necessarily. But it's possible for a human being to come from an upscale perspective to a situation. It's just that it's pretty difficult. If the downscale perspective has taken dominance, and the catch is the downscale perspective easily takes dominance for a number of reasons, and we might analyze that to some extent a little bit later. But for now, let's just acknowledge that very often it makes sense to be a little bit reserved when you approach people, for one thing. I mean, this is a civilized society in which we live, and people are supposed to maintain a certain level of formality, and whatever the reasons are, it's sort of you can't even in a handshake generate too much in terms of acceptance, in terms of encouragement. You want to test the person out first. Is something that perhaps could be claimed is a functional way of operating in the kind of everyday in which we are, because it's a possible view. But the alternative view, it's not really that optimal. And in any case, it's not one that would, you could say, be the first choice for somebody who is operating in the everyday from the point of view of an upscale, from the point of view of the fact that, miracles happen. But miracles, when they happen, somebody has made the miracles to happen. So somebody must have believed in some sense that miracles can happen. If you think about one potential upscale register perspective, miracle. And I mean, if you think about the fact that at the current time, Nokia isn't doing like it was doing in the late 90s, but Nokia is still a tremendous company. You say, yeah, but in the 90s, you know, it really was amazing. I mean, from Finland, you know, 5 million people. I mean, just imagine the situation from the point of view of Motorola. Bored. At the time, they started to hear that, you know, there's this company from Finland that is coming up with some interesting challenges for us. And somebody in the board says, Finland, that's Europe, right? Yeah, that's in Europe. Somebody said to me they have only 50 million people. I mean, what do they believe they can do? Only 50 million people, that's ridiculous. They won't do it. And I mean, it just was totally unlikely that you could come into the most exciting consumer electronics market from Finland. But de facto, that's what happened. So you could say, yeah, miracles can happen. In order for them to happen, somebody else needs to make them happen, which means that these people that make them happen somehow have to be able to adopt an upscale register perspective. And that's different from saying that, you know, people should be in some ways unrealistic. Of course we want to be realistic, but being realistic is different from accompanying that realism with a view to the future and a view to the possible. And with a view of a phenomenon. And this is now our last point of this first section here. And with the view of something that I would call the 3 fundamental human capabilities beyond the school pedagogical paradigm. I mean, obviously, you know, institutions such as Aalto University, at whose campus we are here now at, is that people have capabilities, but capabilities need to be brought to fruition by particular kind of training and particular kind of pedagogies. But the idea is to identify certain competencies and then target these competencies from the point of view of particular kind of tasks that the competencies are relevant for. You say, this is an excellent approach. It's a structured approach. So you identify competencies, and you develop the competencies, and the competencies are the ones you need for these particular tasks. All right, but could it be that there are strengths that people have which somehow fall outside the realm of all such competence lists? And you can say, well, if you think about, let's say, being present, you might say, yeah, this is a human capability. People can be present. You know, somebody meets somebody and somebody can be present to somebody that the person just met. And meeting, you know, somebody can be present in the meeting. It's amazing. You can be present or not present to your child. In most contexts, in fact, you know, you can be there without really being present, assuming only that you can cope with the immediate tasks on some level. That seems enough. So you could say much of the time people, in fact, can, as it were, hold back their presence. They could do that because of the fact that they can't really trust the occasion, for instance. So therefore, allowing yourself to be fully present would be foolish, because there could be aspects to the situation that fire back. Or I don't really trust these people, so I don't really allow myself really to be fully present to them. Because this is a possible view, but it doesn't change the fact that people can be, as human beings, present. Now, I'm going to show in just a moment a video cut that's going to demonstrate these 3 capabilities beyond the competence model from my point of view. And it's going to be a music performance, and as the music performance starts, what you see there is the great Spanish tenor Placido Domingo performing a number, but irrespective of how much you have looked into this kind of music, and of course people's music tastes change. They're different. You know, from one person to another, somebody's in jazz, somebody's in rock, music, pop, whatever it might be, classical. Well, this is classical. It's 3 minutes piece, but you know, you don't have to be in this kind of music in order to see that this person is present in what is his everyday. So he has activated as part of his human operating system, if you will, this particular dimension of being present. Although he might have performed the song 300 times, but he clearly is present to this particular performance. Now, then the camera angle changes, and another person comes to the picture. This other person is the great Indian conductor, Jubi Mehta. But from the point of view of the great Indian conductor, Jubi Mehta, an orchestra of this caliber can handle the challenges at hand pretty easily at this juncture. So he isn't doing that much. Vis-a-vis the orchestra, he's allowing himself to enjoy the beauty of the music. He's there with his eyes half closed, which of course the conductors seldom do, because conductors do a lot of their work through their eyes. But he's allowing himself to enjoy the beauty of the music because the orchestra can handle the situation right now. But then what happens from our point of view is particularly interesting, because what he does is that he turns to his singer with this air of being by your sideness, with this as the emphasized encouragement through the way he's just looking at the singer. It's almost like saying, you know, I trust this is going to be the greatest performance ever. I can sense that, you know, it's such a gift, Placido, to be standing here next to you with this fantastic orchestra. So that's the message that Jubi Mehta, the great Indian conductor, through his eyes is sending to his singer in the second part of the performance. So please pay attention, this being by your sideness on the part of the conductor vis-a-vis the singer as it emerges. And notice how, you could say, minimal it is. And notice also how it emerges in the situation. It's not on a task list. It can't be that on a task list it says, turn to your singer. It's like it's something that just somehow fits the moment and allows the third part to be prepared for and to emerge. Something I would call magical uplift. And now the elevation. Now the expression magical uplift here is quite conscious on my part, because I've looked pretty heavily into all kinds of research when it comes to human interaction and human psyche, and all kinds of aspects of us as human beings can be investigated by science. But then there are phenomena that science really can't put its finger on very well. And this is such a phenomenon. It's the same phenomenon you see sometimes in sports, where a sports team somehow is raised to another level 3 minutes before the game is over. It really is amazing. I mean, why did it happen only now? Yeah, it's good it still happened, but it's possible for human beings somehow to become raised to the next level. So this is the phenomenon that we see in the third part of the performance. And you see it coming when the camera angle again changes. The conductor comes to the picture the second time. He's very, very demanding now to the orchestra, as opposed to the second part, very, very demanding to the orchestra. But at the same time, he's following his singer very, very intensely and delicately. That's when the third part starts. So let's take a look at this 3 minutes video cut as an illustration of these key themes.